You can't go wrong with German wheels. You just can't. BBS, Keskin, Messers, it's just like a match made in heaven. Like beer in Germany, or beer in Oktoberfest, or beer just any day. I might have a problem, but that's besides the point. Now, there's been a company that's truly been involved in the automotive wheel community for decades and pretty much led to the German market being involved when it came to wheels from the start. We're deciding to talk about the rich German history of Ronal Wheels. Ronal, you have to say it with your throat. Ronal.
Jesus Christ.
Ronal AG is a conglomerate company that was based in 1969. Founded under the name, which was an abbreviation of aluminum, and his name, Ronald, centric, action, fun, excitement. 50,000 subscribers, by the way, thank you so much. Roland Worth changed the way people did wheels, and it was just kind of wheel stuff. You see, back in the day, Carl was doing his own thing in 1967. He won the German Formula V Junior Cup, which is a pretty cool thing. I mean, I got a B on my science class, and this guy was winning races, but it's besides the point, no big deal. The next year, he decided to found Ron Motor Testing Equipment. Now, Carl wanted to do all sorts of things with the new company, and that would go into his passion of just racing cars. But there was only one really small problem. His clients didn't really care about what he was trying to make. Instead, they cared about the wheels that he managed to put on his Opel. It didn't really make sense. He was trying to do race car stuff, and they're like, yo, Roland, we want to know what's up with those wheels, dog. We're trying to get on Stance Nason's IG, and we want to know how we can do that. The wheels Carl had were Remotex and fitted by a man named Norbert Oberschmidt. Now, Norbert would spend his spare time doing wheel designs while he was studying math and physics, which was also a pretty cool thing to do. Now, Norbert was a pretty smart guy. Carl realized that because Norbert had a craft that would probably benefit his company if he could bring him on board, which at the time was still Ron Motor. So they decided to essentially partner and convince Norbert to come on board and begin making wheel designs in his spare time. So Carl began spending and selling aluminum wheels that Norbert would design in-house. And that's really how the company began to fruition and began making products that you actually wanted to buy. The name naturally changed from Ron Motor Testing Equipment to Ronal. Now, the most wheel history is built within the difficult decades of adversity, but not with Ronal. Ronal was like, they just kind of came on board and they started making wheels, and because they were one of the first to really jump into a market that didn't exist at the time, everybody wanted them. Now, they woke up one day and they just decided that they had a company that could make wheels, and people wanted their wheels more than anything else possible on their race cars at the time. And well, because of the convenience and locality, it worked. So Ronal began making a lot of their sand casted wheels because it was just convenient, it was cheap, it was effective, and it worked kind of sort of for the most part. Now, instead of trying to find a larger company to outsource to, Carl was like, no. You don't know why? Because he's German, and that's just what Germans do. Carl decided to bring it all in-house, and by building really a new factory, he just brought the entire mold casting process into Corse, Germany, and from there, he didn't have to worry about any sand casting processes. By building a new factory, he had now a bigger market to make aftermarket wheels. But at the same time, companies were coming up to him and asking if they could just make OEM wheels for their cars, and Ronald was like, why not? So while the OEM growth continued, Ronal entered the multi-piece game that was made with cast magnesium that was used for pretty much all their racing stuff. So how did it do? Pretty good. Growth followed, Ronal, because they just continued to make stuff that people continued to buy. And because there was no competition at the time, and because they were involved in both OEM and aftermarket, they pretty much had money coming out of every orifice you could possibly imagine. This Tiny Tim company began making wheels for pretty much everybody. Based out of Waldorf, Germany, Ronal hit the market running. They had more factories and more money and more everything. They didn't really know what to do with it. By the end of 1969, Ronal had over 15 designs to compete with other companies like the notorious BBS. By the mid-70s, Ronal had opened up another factory in France. Saab jumped on board into the Ronal Love Boat, which developed the famous Inca wheel, which, by the way, if you looked at it, it looks questionable. Soon, Audi was on board with the whole yeah brand, and Ronal was ready to go because by the time that they entered into more partnerships, they were producing over 350,000 wheels. Now, this was just OEM wheel production. This had nothing to do with their racing, motorsport, and anything in between. From there, Ronal went international. They were in like Flynn by the mid-1980s, producing aftermarket racing wheels and dominating the OEM market as one of the largest manufacturers in the world. 1 million wheels by 1984. That's a lot of wheels. And like it's a lot. They also introduced the Ronal R10 Turbo, which was likely the most infamous Ronal wheel to hit the market and the streets at the time. And if you go out there to try and find some of them, they are extremely difficult. They are considered probably one of the most difficult wheels to get their hands on, right next to the turbo and multi-piece turbo that you can actually find. I believe there are few people that actually own the set. And it's kind of interesting to see such success with the R10 turbo because I'm pretty sure the Ronal teddy bear came out shortly thereafter. Bizarre wheels, go check it out. Anyway, Ronal began diving into racing and motorsport with their wheels to establish credibility as not only being the brand for OEM, but for the aftermarket too. And it worked. Because Ronal was synonymous with quality in racing, they were also synonymous when it came to just creating quality products that didn't break the bank. And for OEM manufacturers, that was a big deal. Now, for the most part, Ronal was trying to do both. They were trying to make OEM wheels and aftermarket wheels at the same time. And if you know any company out there that's trying to do that, it is extremely difficult. Most companies just decide to go into OEM because you can make more money than you could making aftermarket wheels. I'm sorry, Instagram builds just don't cut the bill when you're, making a million wheels. Every car company wanted a factory for Ronal because it just made it easier for them to produce wheels. And at the time, Ronal was exploding. They built plants and that worked. The plants that they did build for specific companies, most of them ended up going out of business or transferring over into different segments. And that was probably the biggest hurdle as plants were just trying to stay open outside of Ronal's core network. The original partnership between Norbert and Carl maintained as Norbert continued to crush wheel designs until his ultimate retire in 2003. And Carl continued on to push the Ronal name until his death in 1991. OEM continued to grow, and to this day, more than 17 million wheels and 5,500 employees carry the Ronal badge. Ronal continues to be probably one of those dominant companies out there, even though a lot of companies just really haven't heard of them. And people like you and me really don't care too much about OEM wheel production. But there is probably a brand that you do know and do care about, and that's Speedline. They ended up buying Speedline Corse and Speedline truck. They just wanted to have an aftermarket wheel brand that they could really kind of just bring on without having to do all the heavy lifting, while Ronal just did all the OEM stuff, and it really just kind of succeeded. Everybody loves Speedline, everybody loves Ronal, even though they don't really know who Ronal is, which is completely fine. Ronal continued to push the Speedline brand, and because Speedline had excessive knowledge in flow forming, which is something Ronal sorely needed, Ronal just picked them up, and shortly thereafter, Speedline trucks was also created for commercial vehicles and to make a little bit extra money. They started Sandswish, they took over Full Champ, which is a full forged wheel specialist company and takes a hefty bite out of the market share from Carbon Revolution in 2013. So Ronal is going absolutely anywhere, and they continue to grow just by acquiring different companies and essentially kind of being the cool kids on the block because they were one of the first people to make the carbon fiber wheel. Ronal's history of wheels may seem like it's only OEM, and you may kind of right, but they do have a lot of stuff in the aftermarket scene, and it's considered one of the biggest reasons a lot of the German competition of aftermarket wheels exists is because of Ronal. So that's everything that we have on Ronal Wheels. We hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. And of course, if you're looking to kick up some wheels, tires, or suspension, check out fitmentindustries.com. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. We'll see you later. Peace.